Have you ever felt like your homeschool was a complete failure? I've been there. For months, our days ended with incomplete assignments, frustration, and what seemed like a river of tears. My daughter wasn't getting much of anything done, and I felt like it was wrecking our whole homeschool. And then one day I realized that the problem was our reading curriculum. So I threw it out. Don't get me wrong, I love homeschool curriculum. Every year I roam the aisles of homeschool conventions and browse the pages of catalogs, dreaming about all of the things. Those bright and shiny packages seem to call my name. Curriculum is amazing until it isn't. You see, sometimes we get so hung up on the idea of that open and go textbook or box curriculum that we fail to see its shortcomings. Can I tell you a secret? You don't need a curriculum for every subject. This is especially true for reading. Today, I'm going to share with you how you can simplify your reading requirements, help kids to actually enjoy reading, and watch your kids fall in love with learning again. How does that sound? First, if we haven't met, I'm Kim with Not Consumed Ministries. We help families grow in faith so that they can live not consumed by life circumstances. I feel pretty old saying this, but I have over 30 years of teaching experience, with 10 of those in the public school classroom and 20 plus years as a homeschool teacher. I also have a master's degree in reading and curriculum design. So you would think that reading would not be a problem around my house, wouldn't you? That's not how homeschool works, or any education system for that matter. Every kid, curriculum, and circumstance is different. Now, if you've been homeschooling long, you know that problem solving is really just a part of the journey. Now, in case you're tempted to think that being a former teacher makes it easier to homeschool, let me clear that up. It's not. In fact, sometimes it's harder because we can't seem to let go of those traditional education methods that we learned. Which brings me back to my daughter and her reading curriculum. Although the other kids loved using the curriculum that we were using, it was throwing everything off for her, and I needed a quick intervention. But to be honest, I did not want to switch. It was expensive curriculum, and I thought it was good. Plus, it was producing great results for the other kids. I tried for some time to reason with myself, but kept missing the point. Sure, it might be great for the other kids, and it might be the most excellent curriculum money could buy, but none of that really matters if it's not working for your child, especially if it's a daily battle to even get her to open the book, much less learn anything from it. Here's the truth of the matter. It might be an excellent curriculum, but if it doesn't work for your child, then it's not. Simple, right? I knew the answer at this point, which was 4th grade, was to get her reading things that she would at least partially enjoy. Since reading was already difficult for her, I was just making it worse with subject matter that was irrelevant or uninteresting. So we set aside that great reading program, and she started reading a mystery series called Scripture Sleuth, which she picked out. She read a new chapter book every day and recorded what she learned in her journal. The result was better than I had expected. She loved the new curriculum, which wasn't really a curriculum at all. Suddenly, her checklists were complete, not just in reading, but in all of the other subjects that had become impossible for her to do. I tell you this story because I want to empower you too. I want you to feel free to get out of the box that we often believe is the only real way to homeschool. I want you to know that you can toss out the curriculum. Yep, I said it. Your child doesn't need a reading curriculum. Let me show you why. Number 1, many times reading is covered in other subjects. When your kids are learning how to read, your main subject and focus should be reading. You're probably going to want some great books and probably will need a resource to teach your child how to read. But once your child has gotten past those easy readers like Bob books, you can actually break away from the curriculum. In fact, I would argue that it's better if you do. Why? Well, in late elementary, middle, and high school, the reading required for other subjects such as science and history and even Bible can get really intense. Having an additional textbook for reading can frustrate even kids who love to read, but it will definitely overwhelm those who struggle. I learned this lesson the hard way with my daughter. Our reading curriculum was a fat textbook full of a collection of stories carefully curated by a very popular and well-respected company. But that was actually the exact problem. Reading was a weakness for my daughter, and she was overwhelmed by the amount of reading that was required, particularly since she had so many other subjects that required her to read as well. When we broke free, everything changed. Suddenly, she wasn't overwhelmed anymore, and the daily tears stopped. Win. Plus, she was more successful in her other subjects because we freed up brain space that she could use to put forth more effort in those areas. I call that a win. Number 2, kids thrive on bite-sized books rather than chunky anthologies. Now, as a former classroom teacher, I was very quick to ditch the anthology. anthology. If you don't know what that is, it's just a fancy word for a large collection of stories in a textbook form. I'm sure you've seen them. Most kids find these very boring and pretty overwhelming. Their stories feel random and unrelated too. As a homeschool mom, I found that they had the same issues that they did in the classroom, but they also were very, very costly. So instead, we use living books, like picture books and chapter books. These books draw kids into a single story and they're much shorter. They're also available in literally every genre, like biography, science, mystery, fantasy, and so much more. I know the schools have those chunky anthologies, and I know a lot of homeschool curriculum companies do too, but they are not consistent with what we know about how kids learn. Research shows us that kids thrive on bite-sized pizzas. I like to say that when you're teaching kids, it's best to break it down, not water it down. Kids of any age can learn about obscure and fascinating fish or detailed facts about indigenous people groups, as long as they have bite-sized portions of information. We don't have to give them books that dumb down topics. We just need to give them less information at one time, and you'll be shocked at how much your kids can learn. Plus, when we give them smaller books, they have a sense of accomplishment instead of constantly looking at that giant section of reading that they have left to do still. All right, number 3, living books are actually far more interesting than textbooks. That fat textbook that I mentioned could have ruined our homeschool. I didn't realize how much it was frustrating my daughter because her older sister loved it. Thankfully, we switched, but I must admit that I didn't give up so easily. A year or two later, I tried using it with my son. He was an early reader and didn't struggle as much as his sister, but the curriculum was still a disaster. The textbooks were boring to him, and he didn't want to do his reading assignments. He much preferred the stack of books that he had picked up from the library. And I found that he learned so much more from those books than he did from the curriculum. Here's the truth. Real living books have a superpower that a collection of stories in a textbook cannot compete with. Kids pick them up because they want to learn about a particular topic, or they want to do an adventure in an imaginary place. Also, reading living books has a purpose, and it seems more like fun. That chunky anthology can feel like a chore where someone else is forcing you to do something. Which brings me to perhaps the biggest reason why we will never go back. Number 4, students should get to choose what they read. Most parents struggle with the idea of allowing their child to read whatever they're interested in. We struggle because we weren't allowed to do that. I spent 12 years in public school being told exactly what to read and when to read it. Maybe you did too. But the truth is, someone is always doing the picking. There isn't a standardized list of required reading for any age. Every year, teachers pick what they think their students should read. And they have to do that because they teach 25 plus students in their class period. It would be impossible to allow students to choose what they would individually want to read. But in our homeschools, we're free to choose what we want to read. Now, in some cases, there may be a book or two that I would pick for my kids. Sometimes there's just good things that I know I want them to read, but they might not pick up on their own. But in most cases, let the kids pick. When kids read about what they are most interested in, they fall in love with reading. They also fall in love with topics that they enjoy knowing about. And as a bonus, they learn a lot more when they're interested in a topic. When kids are forced to read things that they didn't choose, they might enjoy it, but it's more likely they'll do it only out of obligation, and the learning is probably going to decrease. A true love for reading comes from a hunger for more. Give your kids the opportunity to experience that. One great way to have a healthy balance of books so your child is reading quality material and not all cartoons or whatever they're interested in is to have a daily book box. They get to choose a few in the box and you get to choose a few in the box. We would go to the library and pick out 5 books each and put it in our book basket. Once they're all read, you can go back and choose again. In fact, sometimes my kids develop new interests just by swapping books with each other. That was kind of cool. Here's what I don't want you to miss today. Don't be afraid to kick the reading curriculum to the curb. Get it out of here. There's actually a much better option. I know what you're thinking though. If I just let my kids read any book without accountability, does that even count? And how do I know if they're really learning things, right? Yeah, you were thinking that. Right after I threw out the anthology, the first thing I did was march my daughter to the library to get some great books that she was interested in reading. I also picked up a blank notebook. Each day, she would pick a book and then write or draw about what she was learning in her journal. She really enjoyed the freedom, but actually didn't want to have that open-ended writing each day, so I started creating simple prompts for activities that she could do with the things that she was reading. Along the way, I created a system that would allow her to pick her own books and still teach her all those literary elements that she needed to get out of a reading curriculum without a lot of open-ended writing. I called it the Reading Journal. The Reading Journal allows students to pick their own books and then complete a short 10, maybe 15-minute lesson to reflect and show what they've learned. This way, we hold them accountable and we deepen their learning at the same time. It works with picture books and chapter books. As long as your child can read fluently, not Readers Like Bob books, they can use it. We typically say it's perfect for 2nd grade through 5th grade. You can create something like this for your kids, or if you want an easy button, I'll link it in the comments. My kids actually do this same book every year, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. It never gets old because they pick new books each year. They develop strong literacy skills as the activities in the book rotate through a cycle and repeat back for practice. As my kids got older, we moved this concept into middle and high school. Now, these journals offer the same freedom to choose any book, even books they're reading for other subjects like history, science, and social studies. They enjoy reading while also learning literary analysis and other important skills. The middle and high school versions are set up a little bit differently as they help kids plan for and track an entire novel. They're also organized by genre, unlike the elementary journal, which works for any type of book that kids want to read. Teens still get to choose their books though. They choose for fiction and for nonfiction, and we give them lots of ideas. Plus, you as a parent can choose how many books they will actually read. They could actually get away with 4 if that's what you'd really like. If you've gotten this far, you might be thinking, wow, that sounds simple. I promise it really is simple. You can kick that chunky reading curriculum to the curb with 0 guilt. And the best part, you'll watch a child who is floundering and uninterested in learning transform into someone who can't wait to open that book. Wouldn't that be amazing? By the way, my daughter didn't learn how to read until she was 8, which, if you've never heard this, is below the international average of when kids learn how to read, despite what the schools tell you. I'll admit, this made traditional curriculum a challenge for us, but I want you to know that she graduated on time. Actually, she graduated from high school and college at the same time through a dual enrollment program. And today she has a thriving career in dramatic production with an incredible ministry. So if your child seems to be lagging behind in reading, I want you to be encouraged. There's plenty of time. They will get it. Be patient and supportive. Even if it takes a little bit longer for them to learn how to read, no one knows that later in life. Eventually they catch up. Hey, do you have a friend who's homeschooling? Will you send her this video? I bet she could use some encouragement too. And be sure you're subscribed to our channel. In the next video, we're going to talk more about reading for homeschoolers, particularly those who struggle. I'll see you then.